Just before we get into the podcast, I'm going to ask you to do me a favour and hit subscribe. Why am I asking you to hit subscribe? Well, it's because more people like you will get to hear the content and they will then be able to build their coaching business just like you. It's nice to be nice, isn't it? Thanks for listening and subscribing. Welcome to the Cracked Kick-Ass Coach podcast. Today I've got Chris Perkins with me. Now, the interesting thing about Chris is that he was one of the first people I ever met, probably 25, 30 years ago, who was in the coaching consulting space and earning a living out of it. That was a long time ago. At the time I was running my own recruitment business, and I thought, oh, wow, what an interesting job. Caught my attention for two reasons. One, he was doing that for a living, and I didn't know you could do that for a living at that point. And two, he was using Star Wars metaphors and analogies, which had my immediate attention. So today I'm going to find out what Chris has been doing in the intervening years, where that start in his career has taken him, and where he's going next. So if you've kind of thought about coaching, becoming a coach, or a coach, this is an interesting career journey that may mirror your own or may be completely different. Either way, you're going to get something from it. Enjoy into it and having. Great. Let's just get started, Chris. So it was about 30 years ago that I last saw you in the guise
in
of
person. Yeah, a long
in
time ago.
person. Yeah, at the Abbey Business Centre on Princes Street.
Gosh, that takes me back.
I know. Tell our audience what you were doing at that point in time.
Um, I was working for Dale Carnegie training as a training consultant. For anyone who's ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, it all sprung from that. Um, and I think I may have been delivering a session that you came along to called Leadership Lessons from Star Wars.
That was exactly it.
Yeah,
Yes.
very fond memories of that. Yeah.
I loved it. So, two things happened after I saw you. I am here today. Partly it's your fault
Really?
because, yeah, totally. Because How to Win Friends and Influence People was the first kind of business book, self-help book, whatever you want to call it, book that I ever read. And I only read it because you told me about it. I'd never
Wow.
heard of it before. Yeah. And the fact that you linked leadership with Star Wars was the first connection that I ever made. To like, oh, okay. It actually got me thinking about leadership and what leadership was. Up until that point, I'd never really thought about it. I thought you just told people what to do. Um, and it had a profound effect on me. So when you started commenting on stuff on LinkedIn, I was like, I've got to talk to Chris again.
That is so amazing to hear. I think I did it sort of as a bit of fun, but I think
Mhm.
it was an evening session. It was kind of a
Yeah,
business development activity, and it's a
yeah,
topic that I really like and came to learn that you did too,
yeah.
but never would have thought it would have, helped lead you to where you are. So I'm glad to have played a small part in that. That's
You
amazing.
did. So thank you so much. And still to this day, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think is still one of the best books out there.
Absolutely. I still try and kind of stick to those principles in terms
Yeah,
of like dealing with other people, building relationships. They're timeless, I think.
yeah, definitely. Right, what have you been doing since?
Gosh, well, so I was there so that must have been around, I don't know, 2000, early
Yeah,
2000s.
yeah.
Um, I was headhunted in 2006 to go to an outplacement firm. I'd never heard of outplacement before,
Right.
but it's coaching for people who have been laid off, made redundant. So the
Mhm.
company pays for them to get some support if they're being let go. So, and when I first got the call about that, I'd gone from this really positive, environment, Dale Carnegie training, all very positive, to finding out about outplacement, thinking that just sounds awful. That sounds like kind of ambulance chasing, preying on people that have been laid off. And it's not that at all.
No,
Obviously, the
it's
company
not.
pays for it, so you're not taking money from the individuals. I decided to make the move, and it was an incredible place to be. I mean, the
Mhm.
stories of people coming through a big transition like that, hearing from our coaches, was amazing. And I stayed in that
Mm.
industry for probably another 10 years or so. That's where I
Right.
got talking to a lot of the associate coaches that delivered the services for us and started to think, well, maybe this is something that I could do at some point in my career.
Right.
Then took a bit of a career detour and landed in the career detour into an HR role, and
Okay.
that didn't suit me in a big corporate. And then moved into the world of employer branding. So my degree was in marketing, so it kind of felt like things had gone full circle.
Okay.
So 8 years there, decided to leave and thought I'll set up on my own as an employer brand consultant. And I arrived at that thought in around March 2020.
Well done. Yeah, good timing.
Exactly. So, um, yeah, setting up a recruitment related business
Mm.
at that point was just not going to happen. So, sort of somehow got through early lockdown and picked up a training contract. And then a former colleague of mine pinged me about a job saying, you'd be perfect for this. And it was
Okay.
marketing manager for Randstad RiseSmart, which is the career coaching arm of Randstad. Joined in November 2020 and have been there ever since, and have
Brilliant.
continued that kind of coaching journey in terms of training as a coach and looking at blending that with the marketing role that I'm in.
Fabulous, fabulous. So, for all those years in outplacements, and this is why I've brought you on, because so many people come to our Kick-Ass Culture Coach program who have left the 9 to 5. So they've left the corporate world and they've either left it through their own volition or they've been forced out through
Hmm.
redundancy. So we get people in both of those stages. They tend to be 45 plus, and they tend to be people who, you know, if they're about to pay off the mortgage or it's paid off, the kids are older or there are no kids. They're certainly in a very different position than, in their 20s and 30s where they've got to earn every penny. They still have bills to pay, so they still
Hmm.
need to earn. But the overwhelming sort of feeling from everybody who joins us is they want to give back. They've got lots and lots of things to share. Um, what are you seeing currently in the marketplace in terms of the corporate world? Who are they letting go these days? Why are they letting go? Kind of what levels of management are they letting go? And what patterns are you seeing, Chris?
It's really varied, actually.
Okay.
So I think kind of coming out of the recovery after the
Mm.
pandemic, we saw a lot of people being let go because companies had overhired. When things
Yeah.
came back, they just thought, "Oh, this is brilliant. This is good," and desperately hired people. When things kind of got back to normal, they realized they'd been a bit too optimistic. I think things are different now.
Mm.
Some of the change is being driven by AI and
Hmm.
automation. If one person using AI can do the work of six people
Hmm.
and do it much quicker, it creates a surplus. There are some broad patterns in terms of cross sectors, and then there are some very specific sort of sector related sort of macro things around, what's happening in the economy and
Okay.
globally, that kind of thing. But broadly, it's organizations trying to reshape their workforce for what they think will give them the resilience and the agility to deal with, all the uncertainty we're facing. Sometimes that involves reskilling and redeploying people internally. That's what we work with organizations to do when they first start talking about restructuring. But
Okay.
inevitably, often it reaches the point where they've got more people than they need in a certain
Mm.
area, whether that's skills based or geographically, and they have to take the decision to lay them off. And
Right.
most organizations will now provide outplacement support because
Good.
they recognize it's the right thing to do.
Good.
It's also a good thing from an employer brand perspective in terms of attracting future talent, the remaining employees knowing their colleagues are looked after, all of those kind of things.
Yeah. Good. Good. Okay. And you wrote an article about midlife.
Hmm.
Tell us about the article and what prompted you to write it.
It was about something called the happiness curve.
Mm.
And I wrote it because I realized I had been through it. I was a textbook case.
Right.
So from mid-40s, I had hit the bottom. So it's a U-shaped happiness curve. There's huge evidence for this, about 600 studies all over the world, 150 countries. When you control for every other variable, so gender, income, socioeconomic status, health, everyone tends to follow this pattern where happiness or life satisfaction is pretty high in your 20s, slides down to reach a slump. In Western cultures, it's around sort of 47, 48,
Okay.
and then it picks back up.
Okay.
And I was just kind of fascinated by this idea. When I first heard about it, I thought that was me. My 40s were pretty rough. I went through 2 layoffs. I was doing a long distance commute with a young family at home. I thought I needed to be in the big job to pay the mortgage and all that kind of stuff. I think if you'd asked me in my 20s what I thought the happiness curve would look like, I would have said it's hump shaped.
Yeah.
That things get better and better till around your mid 40s when you are at your peak. Everything is sorted. You can sit back and enjoy life because what's coming is just this slow decline into kind of disease, decay, and eventually death. But it's actually the other way around.
Yeah.
And once you've got through that dip in the bottom, there is so much to look forward to. You know, we're all going to live hopefully well into our 80s. And actually, the period between our 50s and our 80s can be hugely satisfying, even more so than our 20s and 30s. And yeah, I was a textbook case, and I thought I didn't realize that at the time. And I'm pretty sure other people aren't aware that whatever they're feeling in their 40s is actually quite normal.
Yeah.
So it's not this stereotypical midlife crisis. It is just some adjustments we need to make with what life is like at that point. And I thought I want to talk to people about this, share my experience, because I feel I've come out the other side in my mid 50s, got a lot to look forward to. And maybe there are some ideas in there that would help others.
Yeah, I read it and it completely resonated with me, and it resonated with so many people who join us. Um, we get those people who are either in the middle of that flump
Hmm.
or they've just come out the other side. So I spoke to a woman yesterday. She's she's just coming out the other side. So she's moving house in June. Her divorce finalizes in June. She hands over the business to the next generation of leaders that she's been running in June. And she finishes a course in life coaching in June. And I was like,
Wow.
well, you are ticking all the boxes, Mrs.
I would say to people, like, if you're feeling that slump, don't blow up your life and change everything at once. But for some people, clearly it works.
She's she's definitely gone. No, getting rid of that. Getting rid of that. Don't want that anymore.
Good on her.
Tired of being a lonely coach? Well, don't be alone any longer. Join us at tricrest.com, tricres.com. Find all the models, frameworks, PowerPoints, tools you're ever going to need as a coach, help on marketing, selling, and position yourself as a coach, plus a lot of other great kick-ass coaches are in that community. We'll see you there, tricres.com. Bye. I have a theory. So I think you're right. This is really common. I think it ties in with hormonal changes in men and women, because
Yeah.
men's
Hmm.
testosterone reduces
Hmm.
over 45. Obviously, women start perimenopause around that stage as well. So there are a lot of hormone
Hmm.
shifts. And I don't know about you, but when I hit 50, it was the most significant birthday I've ever had.
Right.
Not for anything I did because it was in the middle of lockdown, but it was like I am I'm either halfway through my life or I'm over halfway through my life, depending on how optimistic you're
Mm.
feeling. Because some of us will live to 100, definitely.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Healthy lives to
Hmm.
100. Um, and I think it just personally gave me a completely different perspective in that, okay, I'm no longer going to do the stuff that doesn't serve me because actually I don't have a lot of time anymore.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I don't know whether you got that feeling as well.
Yeah, I was 50 in lockdown as well. We must be about the same age.
I think we are,
So,
yeah.
lots to to reflect on,
Mm.
and wondering kind of what the future held. This idea of sort of starting my own business wasn't going to happen, needed to figure out something else.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's really interesting in the research is the reason we start to feel this shift, this transition, is biological, evolutionary. So, yeah, hormones absolutely play a role,
Okay.
but also the brain is rewiring itself. So,
Again?
yep. So, just
Crikey.
like adolescence,
Right.
it's going through some changes. And the
Ah.
reason we know this is because that midlife slump has been observed in chimps and orangutans.
Oh.
Zookeepers have studied them over a period of time, and they recognize the changes in their behavior, and they go through this period of dissatisfaction. And well, our brain wiring is changing because our role is changing. So in evolutionary terms, we don't need to compete for a mate, compete
Oh.
for shelter and food at this point, and physically things are starting to decline. So we are of more use to the tribe if we play a more nurturing role and pass on our
Okay.
wisdom and help the younger generation take on those kind of primary roles. So that's what's happening in our brains. It's
Okay.
moving us from being satisfied with winning and achieving to being more community focused. And it's not till we sort of understand that we can make sense of, why isn't hitting the next goal, achieving the KPI, giving me the satisfaction that I used to feel? Because it's
Yeah.
not supposed to. It's supposed to move into that kind of next phase of life, nurturing either our own children or the next generation, maybe being in more of a mentoring role, coaching role, for example,
Yeah. Yeah.
and starting to do some different things. So it's perfectly natural, but we've kind of created this cultural phenomenon of the midlife crisis,
Mm.
and we should be, buying sports cars and all sorts of other things, which isn't actually a thing. It
No.
sort of became part of popular culture, but there is no real evidence that it's a phenomenon.
Okay, so you've just beautifully explained where my ambition went.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, because for years and years and years, super ambitious, super this, super that, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden it went. And actually, do you know what, Chris? It was a huge relief.
Hmm.
It was like, I don't have to do this anymore. I can just trundle along. So my theme for this year was steady as it goes,
Hmm.
which is like the first time ever in my life that I've ever had that kind of theme. I had 2 years where I hung out in the unknown, but that was when I was 47, 48. So I think
Right.
that was where the transition
Yeah.
was
Bang
happening.
on track, just like
Oh
me.
my
Yeah.
God, this is incredible. Um, and you're right, this needs to be spoken about because I knew the brain rewires itself as a teenager. You have a boost of hormones when you're a toddler. I did not know it rewired itself at this stage.
Yeah. We're
Uh,
one of the few species where females outlive their reproductive years.
yeah.
And the reason for them staying around is to kind of nurture others, pass on wisdom, support others who are filling those more sort of primary roles in in terms
Oh, hang on.
of
Our
finding
internet went
food
a
and
bit.
shelter, all of that kind of.
Our internet went a bit dodgy there, but no, I got
Yeah.
that. I believe whales also have a menopause, don't they?
Do they? Right.
Yeah, they do.
Right. But I bet
Yeah.
they don't have a midlife crisis.
No, they probably just crack on with it. And but then they don't have social media, so they're a lot better off.
Well, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, right. Okay. What advice do you have for people who are experiencing this?
That it is perfectly normal.
Hmm.
You reach that point where, as you said, your sort of ambition left.
Hmm.
And it's very common to sort of feel an emptiness, everything,
Mm.
hollow achievements, continuing to do what you've always done isn't really working. And then you start feeling dissatisfied about being dissatisfied because you can't
Mm.
work out why. But it is perfectly normal. It's nothing to worry about. it's extremely unlikely that you're going to have a crisis as in a dramatic event. And actually, the evidence shows for people in their middle years, between 8 and 20% of people experience some sort of mental health crisis, which is actually
Okay.
less than figures for Gen Z at the moment.
Okay.
So it's probably not something that needs to be medicated. It's
No.
probably not something that needs kind of clinical support. Coaching certainly may help, but
Hmm.
also just appreciate it's normal. Things will get better. But I can absolutely understand you don't just want to wait several years until you get into your 50s where you'll feel happier and less stressed. So there are things you can do to start to address those feelings. One of the challenges is often we feel we are so deeply embedded in our lives,
Mm.
career, mortgage, looking after kids, possibly caring for aging parents. You've got all of this going on, and people just feel stuck. It's like,
Mm.
I don't know how I can kind of break out of this. And my view is it doesn't need to be blown up and broken out of. You can just start testing some new things. So, new hobbies or interests that might, bring you some chips around you, maybe investing more time in those, and that
Mm.
will help you derive more satisfaction, paying more attention to your health, what you're eating, your sleep habits, all of those kind of things, just kind of little things that will start to make a difference. They'll all start to compound because often if you decide to do something drastic, you're probably misdiagnosing what the problem is. If you think it's all
Mm.
down to my job, I just need another job, and you walk out and land something else, you probably haven't addressed the root cause. So those kind of rash decisions, I think, are something to be really cautious of. But try some new things, test and learn rather than do anything dramatic.
That's really sound advice. And first of all, understanding that it's normal.
Hmm.
I think that's the first thing. And why do you think we're not talking about this? I know we talk a lot about the menopause, which
Yeah.
is fine, which is more it's more medicalized, but this isn't, like you say, it's not a medical thing. It's a natural progression. Why don't you think we're talking about this natural progression?
Yeah, I think you're right. The conversations around menopause certainly have become far more open over the last few
Yeah.
years. My wife is a similar age. She is going through that. So there has been much more openness about the fact that it's a perfectly natural change. I think with men in particular, this sort of midlife slump is characterized as midlife crisis and all the
Mm.
stereotypes that go with it. Men don't typically open up
Mm.
often, to their friends, the people round about them. And because of all of those stereotypes, I think there's a danger that if you do, you're just going to be the butt of all sorts of jokes about
Yeah.
like buying a Harley Davidson or a sports car, leaving your wife, having an affair, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. We don't take it seriously, much like
Yeah.
we weren't willing to think there were perfectly natural sort of hormonal reasons why women were experiencing change in their behavior, change in their
Mm.
mood, all of those kind of things. The same kind of thing, can happen to anyone at this period. Um, but we just don't accept that it's normal
Mm.
because everyone else should be, keep your head down, get on with things, stop feeling sorry for yourself, especially if outwardly you appear to have made it. It's like, what have you got to be sorry for?
Yeah.
Like, just get on with it.
Yeah. Let me bring this back to the corporate world, because this period of time, sort of, let's call it a broad sort of 45 to 55,
Hmm.
roughly. Um, that period of time, people who perhaps have climbed the career ladder are experiencing extreme stress, extreme pressure. Um, and actually, from what you're saying, it sounds as though that's the last thing you need.
Potentially, yeah.
Um, because you're not giving yourself time and space to step back and observe what's going on in your body and your mind and things like that. And as I look from the outside in, I see a lot of people are very much attached to their identity is attached to their job, or their identity is attached to their business.
Hmm.
Again, what kind of advice do you have for people who need to take a little bit of a step back and just go, whoa.
Yeah, I think from a corporate perspective, there are
Mm.
things organizations could be doing better. And I think the
Okay.
irony is a lot of the people in leadership roles that can make those decisions are this age
Yeah.
and are maybe keeping it under wraps that they're feeling these things. So
Yeah.
maybe being more open about it kind of opens up conversations about, well, what other options could we have? But to sort of step off that treadmill and instead maybe look for roles that involve more mentoring
Mm.
or development activities for people joining the organization or just coming into the workforce. Or, if possible, consider some kind of sabbatical or career break.
Mm.
If you work on the basis that in our 50s, we're probably going to have 30 years of healthy life ahead of us.
Yeah.
If you look back at everything you did between 20 and 50, you've got the same amount of time all
Yeah.
over again. I don't recommend doing the same things all over again,
No.
but you've got that amount of time. And if you look at your pension pot or whatever, and you think I'm going to have to work into my 60s, possibly like, 70 beyond, and physically will be capable of doing that, why not take a break in your
Mm.
50s, maybe, and do some traveling or pursue a hobby, um, spend more time with people that, the high pressure corporate role has maybe taken you away from. And if companies were more set up to allow that kind of thing, career breaks, sabbaticals, whether they're paid or unpaid. And I think if the financial industry was maybe a bit more creative in thinking what could happen as far as pension drawdown.
Yeah,
You can access it from 55, which is
you can.
helpful, but a lot of people think I need that savings. I need those savings for later life. But maybe you could, access some of your pension funds to do a course,
Yeah.
invest in some sort of education that might help you take your career in another direction.
Yeah.
But you take some time out of that corporate role and then come back into it a year or two later.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize they can take a little bit of their pension at 55
Yeah,
and still pay into it and it can still grow. I was
yeah.
speaking to my IFA about this the other day. Um, and it's something I'm considering doing, taking a little bit of a monthly income from my pension while still working
Hmm.
to, as exactly as you say, Chris, to explore other things.
Yeah, a lot of
Um,
organizations do have career break policies in place, so it's
yeah,
worth looking that up. Speaking to your manager about what the options are. We've all got the right to request flexible working. Now,
yeah,
normally that is sort of hours on a weekly basis, but maybe talk about an extended period of leave if you
yeah,
just need a break or you want to reflect on things or do something different.
yeah. And how about organizations recognizing that they need some wise grey hairs and some wisdom retained in their organization? Um, are there any organizations who are specifically saying, no, we want to keep you at 55 and 60 because actually we need you to help the 20 and 30-year-olds? Do you see any evidence of that?
Yeah, there are a couple.
Okay,
Aviva is one
okay.
who do what they call a midlife MOT.
Wow.
So it's more than just the annual appraisal, but at about this time, sort of 45 to 50, they have a structure for a conversation around what do you want to achieve over the
Right.
next, 5 to 10 years, and how can we help you as your current employer to achieve that. So that looks at everything from finance and pensions through to the areas of work that you want to pursue, new skills that you want to develop, the amount of time you want to spend at work. So they're really progressive. It's a pensions organization, but
Yeah.
it's really proactive in terms of
Yeah.
wanting to help people make the most of those later years. Um, Unilever have a scheme where people can opt to come out of a full-time role, and it's almost like working on an associate basis, but you are paid
Okay.
a retainer, but you
Okay.
make yourself available for different parts of the business. So obviously it's a manufacturing business. They have production schedules. If they need extra people, they can call people in who are all Unilever employees or former employees, but they're part of this talent pool that they can tap
Ah,
into and work more flexibly. So there are companies out there doing some really interesting things. We just
brilliant.
need more of them to think the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, that is brilliant. Genius.
Yeah. Oh, it's
Absolute.
kind of obvious though. It's like, what a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Why don't we all do that?
Yeah, yeah. Why don't we all do that? Absolutely. That's fabulous. And what's happening with you, Chris? Where are you going with your career?
So I'm still in a full-time role, which I very much enjoy, but I'm
Good.
very fortunate to work for an organization that delivers career coaching. I'm just coming
Yeah.
to the end of my coach training, and I've had a conversation with my manager about wanting to blend some delivery, so coaching for our end users, our client customers, whilst still continuing in the marketing role. And I think the two will blend really well. You know, that
Yeah.
experience of working with people on the front line is going to inform what I do in my marketing role, but it sort of scratches an itch in terms of me wanting to explore coaching from, 20 years ago
Good.
when I first thought this is something I might like to get into.
Yeah.
Um, and further down the line, I also may have the opportunity to perhaps transition out of the full-time role to some extent and work on an associate basis as one of our coaches, or potentially
Amazing.
have a coaching practice of my own. So it's nice to know I have that flexibility, that option to
Yeah.
kind of try things out. And I'm really fortunate in that the Randstad culture supports that.
Yeah.
As a career development organization, people within the organization have the opportunity to kind of move into different areas, try different things. So I feel really fortunate in that respect.
That's brilliant. What a great organization.
Hmm.
Whee! Puts
Yeah.
its money where its mouth is.
Tries to. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. God, how refreshing. I'm going to finish on an existential question, Chris.
Okay.
All right. If you only had a year to live, what would you change about the next 12 months of your life?
I would travel.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. I love traveling when I have the opportunity to do it. There are so many places I would love to see. And I would definitely kind of book a round the world trip, tick
Great.
off some things on the bucket list. If it actually was a bucket list, yeah, then
Yeah, definitely. And
yeah.
where would you go first?
Japan's my dream holiday
Okay.
destination. My wife would like to visit South Korea, so we could
Oh,
combine that in one trip. Pacific Islands, road trip across the states, all of
wow.
those kind of things.
Amazing. Amazing. Wonderful. Well, I hope you get to do that and live a very long and happy life.
Thank you. Hope you do too. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. That's amazing. Thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. We hope you got true value out of it. And if you did, what would be lovely is if you could leave us a 5-star rating. Why 5-star? Well, that helps the algorithm. And as we all know, the algorithms rule the world. So if you've enjoyed it and you've got value out of it, give us a 5-star rating so other people can enjoy it too. Thanks. See you next time.